G'day and welcome to the briefing room, coming to you live for the very first time from downtown Jakarta. I'm Luke Brown. I'm Head of Policy and Engagement here at the Climateworks Centre, and I'll be your host for today as we explore what Indonesia's next big climate pledge could mean for the country and for our region. Indonesia is among the world's 10 biggest emitters, and recent analysis by Climate Analytics found it right up there in the top 5 in global exported emissions. It's also located in the world's most densely populated and climate vulnerable region. So greater ambition in Indonesia is vital, not just for the nation, but for its people and for the world if we are to keep warming under 1.5 or at a safe level. Like all parties to the Paris Agreement, Indonesia will shortly update its nationally determined contribution, or NDC, a climate pledge that amounts to a national statement of intent about climate action and ambition. So today we're going to unpack the factors contributing to that update and talk a little bit about how we see the trends evolving here in the Nusantara. Over the next hour, we'll hear from experts in our Indonesia office, starting with Egi Giwangkara, Egi to his mates, our Senior Project Manager in Climateworks Indonesia team. Egi will take us through what we can expect from Indonesia's second NDC. After that, Petra Christi, Senior Analyst in our Indonesia team, will take us through what the NDC could mean for the corporate sector. And last but not least, our country lead, Guntur Sutiyono, will explore the opportunities and some challenges that a stronger NDC presents for Indonesia and its partnerships with other countries. We'll be taking your questions at the end of the session, so please keep them coming through the Q&A button on your screen. That's enough from me. Let's kick off with our very first speaker. It's a very great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Egi, coming to us live from the leafy hills of Bogor. Egi is a Senior Project Manager in Climateworks Indonesia team, leading projects and advising on energy policy, power sector transformation, and low carbon development. Previously, Egi worked for the IESR, the Institute for Essential Services Reform here in Jakarta, an Indonesian-based energy think tank. And Egi's also worked with a number of multinational agencies, including US, UNDP, USAID, and GIZ, the German Development Cooperation Agency. Egi has a Master in Energy, Sustainability and Environment from the University of Auckland and a Bachelor of Science in Applied Climatology from EPB University. Over to you, Egi.
Thanks for the kind intro, Luke. In this opportunity, I would like to unpack 3 key updates from Indonesia's next NDC. This will mark the country's 5th submission to the UNFCCC since the establishment of the Paris Agreement in 2015. The expected updates from Indonesia's NDC are, first, an increasing ambition through the addition of a new sector. Second, a more streamlined NDC with emerging sectoral plans and policies. And third, aligning more closely with the Paris Agreement. Let's look at the increasing climate ambition. One of the major updates in the upcoming NDC is the inclusion of a new sector, which is ocean-based mitigation action. More specifically, it's mitigation measures that rely on mangrove and seagrass ecosystems. It is encouraging to see that this being included in the NDC, as last year, Climateworks published its Sea of Opportunity report, showing that the ecosystem's significant contribution to Indonesia's climate goals. The inclusion will make Indonesia the world's first country to bring coastal and marine mitigation potential to its NDC. We anticipate this addition will be added as a new chapter, rather than explicitly put specific targets alongside the existing sectors due to the ongoing technical discussion. As a growing major carbon emitter, the energy sector will also boost its mitigation actions. One of them is by acknowledging the oil and gas flaring, or burning methane gas into carbon dioxide, that has been around but never been included as a mitigation action. Furthermore, the plan to add a new greenhouse gas, namely hydrofluorocarbon, or HFC, will enable the quite a while HFC phase-out program as another emission reduction effort. Next, let's have a look at how Indonesia is streamlining its emerging sectoral plans and policies into its second NDC. In the upcoming NDC, the government of Indonesia is expected to incorporate the recent sectoral plans and policy developments. Among them are Indonesia Forestry and Other Land Use for Volu Net Sink 2030, Zero Waste, Zero Emission, and the Net Zero Energy Transition Roadmap. The Indonesia Volu Net Sink 2030 agenda was developed during the G20 presidency in 2020. It is translations of the nation long-term strategy to reach negative emissions from the sector by 2030. In addition, the operation plan of this net sink, it's also a guide on the implementations of carbon pricing regulations from the sector. The Zero Waste, Zero Emission Plan aims to address the country's emissions from the waste sector by zeroing in the sector's emission by 2040. Actions include promoting sustainable practices that minimize domestic waste production, enhance recycling and reuse, and eliminate harmful emissions throughout the life cycle of products of domestic solid waste, thereby closing the loop on resource use and reducing environmental impacts. Last but not least, is embedding the progress of Indonesia's energy transition efforts, such as increasing energy efficiency measures, accelerating renewables deployment, retiring coal plants early, as well as implementing low carbon fuels. The ask also covers the ongoing update on Indonesia's National Energy Policy, or NEN in Indonesian. These increasing climate actions and streamlining efforts show the ambitions of the government of Indonesia to have its climate commitments aligned with the Paris Agreement target. Finally, the NDC aligns more closely with the Paris Agreement. Similar to many countries, Indonesia is moving its emission baseline scenario from 2010 to a single year 2019's emissions reference year. By using the same reference year with other countries, emission reductions between countries is now more accurate if we compare and aggregate. Furthermore, increasing the NDC transparency framework that includes the country's national registry system, or SRN, and the measurement, reporting, and verifications of the emission inventory. In addition to this, there is also a plan to bring the just transition context in the NDC. Finally, yet importantly, this NDC will be stepping stone in aligning the subsequent NDC updates towards the Paris-aligned emission pathways for Indonesia long-term strategy. We expect that these updates will be live before COP29 in early November. Indonesia's next NDC submission represents the country's critical step forward in addressing climate change with greater ambition and inclusivity. The upcoming NDC features provide Indonesia with a more robust framework for addressing climate change and set it apart from other emerging countries' NDC, like Brazil, for instance, that more focus heavily on deforestation effort, while India emphasizes more on renewable deployment. The opportunity it presents, economic, environmental, and social, can pave the way for a sustainable and resilient future for the country. That's from me. Thank you, and back to you again, Luke.
Wonderful. Thanks, Egi, for taking us through the framework of the upcoming NDC. Really encouraging to see an increase in overall ambition, specifically with Indonesia being, I think, the first country to include ocean-based mitigation in its NDC, opening the door to new approaches to increasing ambition. It's also good to see HFCs being recognised as a potent greenhouse gas, contributing to the obligations under the Montreal Protocol. Now, without further ado, let's move on to our next speaker for today, Petra Christi. Petra is a senior analyst in our Indonesia team, specializing in sustainability and net zero knowledge for corporations across all sectors of Indonesia's economy. She also leads the team's regulatory analysis of Indonesia's green economic recovery and Indonesia's long-term strategy for low carbon and climate resilience. Petra previously worked in assurance and financial auditing at EY in Indonesia, and she has a master's degree in management from Monash University. and a bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of Queensland. Over to you, Petra.
Thank you, Luke, for the introduction. Today, I will unpack how we can align and strengthen Indonesia's NDC with business action to meet our climate goals and secure a sustainable future. So when we talk about aligning business action with Indonesia's NDC, we first need to understand our country-specific targets and identify how businesses can contribute. Here we can see that Indonesia, which is the orange line in the graph, produced the highest industry emission compared to the other ASEAN countries, which includes emission from mining, construction, as well as manufacturing. Given this, it's crucial that drafting NDCs involves consultations with private sector to ensure their input and involvement in developing strategies. Sometimes the details on how the private sector is involved and their role in implementing this target can be unclear. So what should be done to improve this? I would now like to touch on the relation between consultation and business commitment in strengthening the NDCs. Consultation with businesses will not only lead to input into the NDC, but also defining concrete roles and commitments. This is because a stronger NDC means the possibility of raising corporate climate ambition with a long-term vision to attract sustainable investment. At a minimum, business should align their operations and sustainability objective with national targets. So for example, in Indonesia's agriculture sector, businesses will need to implement adaptation measures that can lead into increased production and quality. The same applies to mitigation measures, which can also boost production. Secondly, a stronger NDC means business opportunity. NDCs can open up business opportunity as national targets, highlights the gaps and the needs in different relevant sectors, therefore offering businesses a chance to assess their contribution and impact management. Now, another way to align and strengthen businesses with NDCs is by incorporating decarbonization actions such as improving energy efficiency in industrial processes, buildings, and transportation, which can significantly reduce emissions. Companies can conduct energy audits and implement energy-saving technologies and practices. For sectors involved in agriculture, forestry, and land use, sustainable practices are critical. This includes adopting agroforestry, reducing forestation, supporting reforestation, and also afforestation projects. And implementing better waste management and circular economics practices can also help meet NDC targets related to waste reductions. Stronger NDC also triggered the development of innovative climate mitigation and adaptation technologies. Promoting technology transfer is essential because many private companies now provide technology solutions and business innovation that supports climate change adaptation and mitigation. Engaging the private sector can also build local expertise with new technologies and introduce business models. Once policymakers have identified and adopted national targets into reducing emissions, it presents an opportunity for the private sector to reflect on how it aligns its operations and sustainability objectives. Businesses can advocate for strong climate policies and collaborate with government and other stakeholders. Public-private partnership can enhance the implementation of NDC-related projects and policies. The government must send a clear message that achieving the NDC requires contribution for all parties, including businesses. This calls for narrowing down the NDC to effective and actionable policies for business, thus maintaining the mandate for disclosure and a transition plan. Indonesia has implemented several policies related to corporate and private sector sustainability disclosure, sustainable action, and sustainable financing. We can see that in this slide, that many policies are established by the Financial Services Authority or OJK. They are mostly related to sustainable finance mobilizations and enhancement around disclosure and transition plan. Lastly, aligning business action with Indonesia's NDC requires a comprehensive approach that integrates sustainability into core business strategies. By setting ambitious targets, investing in renewable energy and energy efficiency, promoting sustainable land use, engaging in policy advocacy, businesses can then contribute significantly to Indonesia's climate goal while also reaping the economic benefit from a more sustainable operations. Thank you, and now back to you, Luke.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks, Petra. Clearly, the corporate sector has a huge role in bolstering NDC ambition, and it's really great to get that overview of how raising ambition can actually lead to business opportunities and to chat through some of the steps that have already been taken. I think your presentation also really showed the co-benefits of coordinated action between government and the private sector, particularly in such a dynamic economic context as this one. If you've just joined us, welcome to the Climateworks Centre briefing room, coming to you live from Jakarta, where we're talking about what a more ambitious climate target could mean for Indonesia. Indonesia, like all parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, will update its nationally determined contribution, its statement of intent for climate policy, before February of next year. So we're here today talking about where we think that target might take Indonesia's efforts on climate. I'm Luke Brown. I'm Head of Policy Engagement at the Climateworks Centre. We've just heard from Egi Giwangkara and from Petra Christi in our Jakarta office. If you've got any questions about what you've heard so far today, please don't forget to pop those in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We're also posting links to our work throughout the presentation in the Zoom chat. Now, I'd really like to welcome our final speaker for today, Guntur Sutiyono. Guntur leads the Climateworks Indonesia team, overseeing projects in sustainable finance, fiscal policy, and energy. Prior to joining Climateworks, Guntur worked for CPI, the Climate Policy Initiative, and for the World Bank. Guntur's career has spanned government, academia, civil organizations, and he's also co-authored several reports on public financial management, fiscal policy, climate finance, land use, and energy policy. Guntur holds a master's degree in development and resource economics from the Norwegian University of Life Science and a Bachelor of Economics from the University of Indonesia. Over to you, Pak Guntur.
Thank you, Luke, for your kind introduction. Well, we hear from the previous speakers interesting insights from their respective areas of expertise. Now, perhaps I would like to bring us to the big picture of Indonesia's economy. Despite maintaining a positive outlook, Indonesia's economic challenges pose a risk for the country's ability to finance its NDC. Our tax to GDP ratio is already on a declining trend since its peak in 2012. 1/5 of our state budget in 2023 and 2024 is allocated to cover debt interest. Our budget deficit this year is confirmed to be wider than last year, increasing investors' perceived fiscal risk. Now, with two large campaign promises, the school lunch program and the ongoing new capital still needing hefty budget support from the coming government, will Indonesia have enough resources to invest for its NDC? Well, a bit of good news is that the NDC does not necessarily depend on the state budget. However, the state budget is critical in making positive signals and enabling factors such as policies. So what is the opportunity presented here for Indonesia and Australia? First, we have to acknowledge that both countries are already on a positive trajectory of green technology policy and investment collaboration. Such collaborations have been in the news many times, so this is a matter of how to follow it up. Programs such as Prospera and the recently launched Kinetic are at the forefront of keeping policy reform agenda towards giving positive climate impacts. Now, there are more opportunities to expand Australia's support in other areas, such as policy reform in finance sector, which we starting to see Australia's role in it. Second, Indonesia is introducing ocean climate mitigation in its NDC. Now, this is a very important signal to not only attract climate finance into blue carbon ecosystems, but also placing Indonesia as a role model in Asia Pacific. Both Indonesia and Australia have rich marine ecosystems and are not lacking ocean scientists, as collaboration among them has already happened. Considering the vast marine ecosystems both countries have in the region, collaborations on policy and science could present a leadership opportunity and potentially demonstrate a win at COP31. Third, there is an increasing sentiment on the need for stronger South-South collaboration in responding to several climate issues, such as just transition, and trade policies such as the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. Now, countries like Indonesia, India, South Africa, and Latin American countries such as Brazil, Mexico, and Chile represent significant intellectual voices. Compared to the US and the European Union, Australia has a more favorable position towards the global South, especially in the Southeast Asia region. So the window for Australia to support the developing countries through knowledge building in responding to these global issues is very much open. So thank you, and back to you, Luke.
Thank you, Guntur. Had a little technical issue here, so hopefully there wasn't any cross-talking coming through on the presentation. Super useful synthesis of everything that's going on here, Guntur, as usual, with a focus on that policy context that really drives so many of these climate policy decisions globally. I've seen a lot of questions coming through our presentations today. So rather than hearing from me, let's jump straight to the questions that you've been sending us. Please welcome back for the discussion our other two speakers, Egi and Petra. And I might just quickly check that we have everybody connected. Yes, we do. Fantastic. So the first question we have coming through is to Petra. And the question is, to what extent has the Indonesian government displayed commitments to including businesses in the process of drafting the NDCs? Petra, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Related to that question, the government has actually initiated several dialogues and partnerships to ensure that businesses contribute to align with national climate goals. So one of the examples through platform like the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or KADIN, businesses have been encouraged to actively participate in discussions and provide input on climate policy, including the NDC. The government has also previously engaged with businesses through Low Carbon Development Initiative, or SCDI, and other similar programs to incorporate their feedback and ensure that NDC is reflected in the practical and actionable commitments from the private sectors.
Thanks, Petra. That's great. Guntur, I know you've worked on both sides of this conversation. I wondered if you had anything you wanted to add on the role that government's taking in bringing business into this conversation.
Yeah, I think coming back to what my previous message that I shared earlier, that I think the biggest homework for Indonesia is policy consistency, and we've seen a lot in how Indonesia is many times maybe falling slightly behind in keeping the consistency and avoiding what seemingly an overlap or a trade-off between both green and economic policies. And we've seen we have a lot of the enormous potential in the green technology, but we also have to acknowledge that we have many homeworks in keeping those industries and the practices also consistently green and sustainable. And there are enormous regulatory framework that we need to improve and standards that we need to raise in order to meet that. So until that is being addressed, we are risking of looking at low quality investments, and this is why I think for Indonesia is about time to attract the higher quality of investments and that the country needs. Thank you.
And do you have a sense of where the incentives are there for foreign capital, or where the kind of roadblocks are in terms of that investment attraction?
Well, it's a tough question, but I think it's what we are looking at in Indonesia is that, as a lot of probably colleagues in the audience would have experienced, is that we are not lacking initiatives. It's just how to keep tracks of those initiatives that we are having. We are going with, for example, right, all of the regulations and policies around sustainable finance. Introducing stress testing, improving our taxonomy with a mix of results, different results and different outcomes. We can argue positive or negative, but I think it's really about, if I have to reflect again to what Petra has explained, or Egi has explained, these areas need a lot of support to keep maintaining them on the track. And this is what Indonesian government sometimes need a lot of motivation and support to get it. And we are not lacking of initiatives, it's getting it done.
Yeah, thanks, Guntur. Got a question here from one of the audience members around what analysis or data is most useful in driving willingness for greater action. Might direct this one to Egi, and perhaps Egi, if you could also touch on some of the evidence base that you mentioned around ocean mitigation and what the data driving that evidence base is.
Thanks, Luke, and also thanks for the questions. So I think there are a couple of good reference for our benchmark on how Indonesia progresses with its climate pledge, and also with the line with the global targets. I think one of the most used from us, Climateworks, is from analysis from the Climate Action Tracker, in which also see the comparison between other emerging countries like India. So there's a couple of assessment in detail, like how the energy sector could play a more ambitious sectors, such as maybe by also deploying more renewables. And despite the recent discussions on lowering the country's renewable targets in the last NDC, the National Energy Policy target, for instance. So I think we can use this analysis from Climate Action Tracker as one of the legit reference to see how the countries progress. And in terms of the Indonesia's significance on ocean-based solutions, so in the last year, we released the Sea of Opportunity report. So there are three main ocean-based mitigation potential actions discussed in the report. First is, of course, from the mangroves and seagrass ecosystem. By doing the ecosystem protections actions, we estimated a total of around 32 to 41 million ton carbon dioxide equivalent of emission reduced per year from the mangroves, while also lesser from the seagrass, but also the second, in which the domestic shipping and ports, domestic maritime passenger transport abatement, which could also contribute a quite significant year mitigation abatement. And last, also, we analyzed the deployment of a mix of 4 offshore energy technologies, in which Indonesia is quite rich in the ocean. So that's a couple of numbers there. So I encourage you to also look at the report.
Now, as a data nerd, Egi, I have to follow up and ask you, based on the work particularly that we did with ASEAN Green Futures, can you talk a little bit about the role of economy-wide modeling and where you see the opportunities are to build a greater evidence base there here in Indonesia?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Luke. So for the our project, the ASEAN Green Future, so we collectively with other 10 ASEAN members, we develop an open, transparent, and also evidence-based modeling to see how the economy, not only in Indonesia, but also other countries, that could have a first collective regional mitigation action, as apparently this is still lacking from the region, from ASEAN. So by modeling the quite aggregated and also coordinated modeling country by country, but also at the regional basis, we can identify some of the opportunity from Indonesia and Vietnam that are very potential in producing low carbon technologies and other examples also quite identified. So we expect that this exercise will be finalizing in terms of the report quite soon. So watch this space.
Thanks, Egi. That's super useful. I've got a really interesting question here about carbon markets. I'm going to throw it to the panel and see who has a view. It's a pretty complex one, but for the longest time, there have been plans and talks of launching carbon markets in the region, but specifically in Indonesia as well, and enabling carbon trading to have a bigger role. I know that there has been a lot of policy movement on that in Indonesia, but the question here is around the context of implementation. The question is, will the implementation of a carbon market be seen as a component in this NDC? And if so, what are the challenges that Indonesia is seeing in effectively incorporating carbon markets into its NDC? I'll throw that to the panel, but I might give you, Guntur, the first opportunity to respond if you have a view.
I feel like Egi and Petra could share a bit more detail about the policy itself and what happens with the implementation. But in short, I think that the carbon market has been floating around in the NDC discussion. I'm quite reserved in maintaining my optimism of having it in the second NDC. But I think, again, the issue comes even before the second NDC. So we need to solve the problem or the issue on just before that happened, before the second NDC itself. So that happens before second NDC. But I think that's it's not easy. It's tough. I don't see that being progressing towards what the market is preferred. But again, maybe Egi or Petra could share a bit more on the detail.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in terms of the complexity. So as we are aware, there are many forms of carbon market in which Indonesia has been also doing this in a decade, like the establishment of the GCM, the joint crediting mechanism with the Japan, for instance, and other non-voluntary or voluntary carbon market and trade. But the thing is, or what it makes complex is the government is trying to align the policy of carbon market to also support the achievement of NDC. So this by linking this, so this makes complexity arises. So I think this is a good news and bad news. A good news is, yeah, the government would like to optimize all the unconditional efforts from the country to achieve its pledge mitigation actions. But on the other hand, markets are also wait and see mode to see what's the next after the policy in try to halting this bilateral or multilateral carbon trade and also market in Indonesia. So the main problem is to to register which carbon that I acknowledge as a B2B or multilateral transactions. What are the transactions or carbon market that are to fulfill the commitments in its NDC, and this kind of embedding the NDC or embedding now. So as I mentioned, the government are now trying to align this with the National Register System, or SRN, which is the backbone of the register system, with the NDC and also with the MRV or JC inventory. So by aligning these three systems, we hope that it will be a more clearer picture in which areas and also actions that could treat it as a national contribution to the NDC, where others can be selling for the broader carbon market. So that's I think my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Egi. Petra, anything you'd like to add there on that challenge, particularly around the sort of the challenges in carbon market implementation and integration into the NDC?
Yeah, sure. It's basically just a little bit of additional points to what Guntur and Egi has already said. So basically, since the launch of the carbon trading mechanism in 2021, it's quite likely that it is going to be further developed and integrated into second NDCs as well. However, there is some challenge that might still need to be addressed. One of the big one is the regulatory and institutional framework. Egi has mentioned around the MRV system, ensuring compliance, and as well as allocation of emissions allowance. So in this case, a robust regulatory framework is quite crucial to effective operation of carbon market and also market readiness. There's quite a number of industry in Indonesia that are interested in getting involved into a carbon market, but not yet fully prepared to participate due to lack of understanding or resource to measure and reduce their emission effectively. And one of the other challenges that is actually quite discussed quite a bit in Indonesia is also pricing and also market liquidity. So setting the carbon price is quite essential to create sufficient incentive to emission reduction. Sometimes when we compare to other countries that's already established a carbon market, if the price is too low, it might not drive significant changes in behavior. And additionally, and then also ensuring enough market participants to maintain liquidity is crucial. And the last but not least is also integration of international markets. So as Indonesia develops its carbon market, it's integrating with international carbon market will be important and to increase effectiveness. So this includes the requirement to harmonize standard verification and addressing potential issues related to market linkage. So yeah, I think if with those challenges addressed or develop into the next NDC on the next government, I think carbon market will be improved in terms of participations or demand.
Yeah. Thanks, Petra. It's a really interesting area. I might pivot us very slightly in response to a few questions, including one from a Climateworks alumni. So thank you very much for joining. There's a few questions around the broad topic of industrial decarbonisation. I know that's something that we're really focused on at the moment. Combining them, the real thrust of the question is, how can we take into account opportunities and challenges in minerals processing? And what low carbon technologies could be used to both generate new industrial opportunities, but also mitigate the impacts of industrial production, particularly minerals processing in Indonesia. I know this is a real focus. This idea of nickel processing and downstreaming is a real focus for the incoming government. Egi, I wondered if you had some sort of high-level thoughts on trends in industrial decarbonisation in Indonesia and where you thought the opportunities were, particularly for collaboration between Australia and Indonesia.
Sure, yeah. This is, of course, an emerging discussions also, as now the government is discussing on how, or maybe to establish the emissions pathway as a benchmark for the both industry actors and also for the NDC itself, because I think two major sectors that are already developed the net zero emission pathways is the Volu sector and also the energy sector. But the IPP and broader industry hasn't yet developed this emission pathways as a guideline for the actors. So I think this is I think it's the discussion is established around the year to have not a credible, but at least the benchmark to start where we at now and the upcoming projections. So it could be a good signal for the actors in developing the credible transition plan, for instance. And also in terms of the potential, I think as Indonesia is also focusing on electrifying its road transport, I think this is a niche sector that Australia could also support Indonesia in decarbonizing the transport road transport sector by means like investing in the at the upstream for the mining extractions and processes, for instance, by supplying its not from captive core power plant, but rather than either the emerging technologies of hydrogen or maybe other type of green electricity for the smelters and also other industrial processes. So I think this is something that Australia has been advancing and developing these technologies, and also quite well in terms of the commercializing the technology. So this is a good opportunity in both countries to have collaborations. I'm also aware on type of real supports. For instance, Gunung Raja Paksi, it is Indonesia's private-owned largest iron and steel, for instance, have collaboration with the Fortescue Metals in supplying the productions with the green hydrogens, for instance. So this is kind of and facilitated by the Catalyst program, in which bilateral program between the countries. So I think this is a good movement, and we can see that this will be rolling throughout the year since the establishment of or kicking off the kinetic, for instance. So there's a lot of going on. So I believe this is also emerging sectors that both countries is focusing on.
Thanks, Egi. It's a really interesting time. I think we've got some of the same similarities and complementarities in factor endowments for the new industrial economy of the future, the clean industrial economy. And I think it's really exciting to think about some of the ways Australia and Indonesia can contribute, including through skills, which is why it's fantastic that Monash has developed a campus here in Indonesia and is working on sustainability programs. I might pivot to that question of implementation and sort of realizing the potential. And this is a question to Guntur, and perhaps our second last. So if anyone's got a burning question that they're sitting on, now's the time to send it through. But a question to you, Guntur, as a penultimate is, you mentioned that Indonesia are not lacking initiatives, and I think we can definitely see that by following the policy narrative, but that Indonesia requires support and motivation. So I wonder if you could unpack that for us and tell us what an ideal set of collective actions would look like to back the initiatives that Indonesia is proposing.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I think this is a really good question, and I could link back to some of the some of the questions that the audience posed. But if I can summarize three things on my note. Number one is something that is a homework, right? That we still have to complete, and that is a sectoral pathway. So, and having a sectoral pathway, decarbonization pathway in each sectors, or maybe go down to the industrial level, will help a lot. Will help both governments and private sectors, as what Petra explained earlier, to start thinking about the transition in their respective industries. Now we are still trying to get that to get a sectoral pathway. So these requires, yes, technical support, and also motivating the relevant government agencies and their colleagues, their partners, to provide that. The second one is, and this is probably quite new, is to refine and collaboration around the modeling work. And this relates to the question around the previous question that Egi addressed. We are looking at, a full steam for minerals. There is a less attention on decarbonization, how this impact NDC. And this is exactly what kind of refining and collaboration around improving the quality of the climate modeling, and especially with the NDC. Because we know that if a country is experiencing a shock, or a global shock like COVID, the pandemic, or economic shock like what we probably a slightly slowdown like Indonesia is experiencing, that will affect the demand for energy, that will affect the future outlook for energy consumption, and so on and so forth. That will also impact our calculation on potential emissions, when we will achieve peak emissions, and so on and so forth. So strengthening and through collaboration, strengthening the modeling work through collaboration is very important to also minimize risk of locking in ourselves into fossil fuels, for example. And the last one, the third one that I'd like to say is to to strengthen our NDC discussion and our NDC diplomacy and work with something that is becoming a global issue. And I want to reflect back to what I mentioned earlier in my third point, that the world is changing. We are now facing global issues like how to respond to just energy transition. What does it mean? How does it going to look in our climate documents or our NDC? We address just transition issues in our long-term strategy document. But how would that affect our other documents, such as our NDC? We are also looking at potential international interactions around trade, right, which will also affect our industry and so on and so forth. So how is our climate diplomats or climate negotiators and climate scientists respond to that? And I think it's really important because everyone seems to look into, or many people look into NDC as the as one of the Bible of our climate policies, the numbers and so on and so forth. So I think it's really important to have those kind of strength and robustness in our modeling in our numbers, which also taking into account what is the current global issues happening right now. So I think those are the three things. And to be honest with you, we are seeing some of these issues and discussions already, issues already been discussed within the NDC community. Again, a lot of these are unfortunately not necessarily been in the public eyes, but what we are witnessing is that the governments and their supporters, the think tanks and university folks, are already taking into account these, well, starting to discuss this. And so I think these kind of areas that what I meant need support and motivation. Back to you, Luke.
Yeah, thanks, Guntur. That's really helpful. Look, as a final question from the audience, are there any tracking tools or dashboards available for people following this to track Indonesia's achievement and progression now that we've established how important that is for Indonesia, but also for the region? Now, I think the answer to that question is no. I'll just sort of pause briefly and let the panel confirm if that's correct. Yep, I'm seeing nods. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really useful. But Egi, how are you kind of tracking progress? Like how are you sort of following this, and what steps do you think are useful in terms of following the achievement, but also the kind of the momentum around climate policy ambition here in Indonesia?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So yeah, in terms of the data, the dashboard, so the Minister of Environment built the System Inventory Gas Rumah Kaca Nasional, National Inventory of GHG Emissions, but it's yet outdated, so not what do you call it, updated in a daily basis. But I think the last reports is 2022, or they are like 2 years. But I think it's also useful to give an overview what are the emissions on a yearly basis. And then in terms of the what's next, I think as the current NDC and LTS are treated as a separate policy, which has no linkage between the two. So by incorporating or aligning with the LTS, I think this is, as I said earlier, it's a stepping stone to orient the level of emissions and scenarios that are pledged in the country's 2021 long-term strategy. So we'll hear the familiar LTS current policy scenario in the upcoming NDC, and also the long-term strategy low carbon compatible Paris scenario, or LCCP, as one of the measurement, the pledge, the low one and the high one. So this is something that good to see. And of course, the next another milestone for Indonesia and other nations is to revisit and also update the long-term strategy itself. It might include first reviewing the actual compatibility of the projected emission with the required target of 1.5 line pathways, Second, probably around translating or embedding the global emission peaking by 2030-ish or sooner, and reductions of more than half of the emissions by 2030. And last, probably around fine-tuning economy-wide emission targets and embedding those in the subsequent NDC targets. NDC updates. So that's I think what we can expect on after the submission of the second NDC.
Thanks, Egi. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our time. So I wanted to start by thanking all of you for joining us today. There were really a lot more questions than we had time for. So I do encourage you to reach out to the team if you're based here in Jakarta or if you're based in Melbourne in person, or do shoot us an email if you wanted to unpack any of the themes that we've talked through today. And stay posted for future webinars talking through issues around Indonesia climate policy and beyond. This will be a really big year for climate policy here in Indonesia, so we'll make sure to share the insights from our experts going forward. Speaking of those experts, I want to say a very big thank you to our panel, Guntur Sutiyono, Petra Christi, and Egi Giwangkara, to our team of comms superstars behind the scenes, Alison Korten, Sophie Stefanakis, Tyler Holgren in Melbourne, and of course to Juni Sulahi here in Jakarta. You can find out a lot more about our work and catch up on this and previous briefing rooms at climateworkscenter.org. We'll send through a copy of a recording from this session and keep you updated on all the latest news and climate solutions. We hope you can join us for our next briefing room event. Details coming soon. And thank you so much for all of the work, for all of you for attending one more time. If you're interested in the work we're doing here in Indonesia, keep an eye out for a special event we're doing with the Herb Feed Center at Monash later this month. Thanks again. Sampai ketemu lagi. See you soon.